In a galaxy gripped by the relentless advance of darkness, a new order was conceived from the ashes of fallen ideals. At the heart of the Empire's strategy to exterminate the Jedi, Emperor Palpatine forged an elite corps to hunt down the scattered survivors, a secret force known as the Inquisitorius. This chapter unfolds the genesis of that lethal organization, where the iron will of Darth Vader was harnessed to mold corrupted Force sensitives into instruments of relentless terror. The tale begins in the labyrinthine corridors of a vast Imperial installation, its interior bathed in a deep crimson glow. Here, amidst flickering holograms and the hum of forbidden machinery, Vader stands as the ominous architect of fear. Clad in obsidian armor that absorbs even the faintest light, he surveys a gathering of grim figures kneeling before him. These individuals, once potential allies or perhaps even remnants of the Jedi Order, have been remade in the Empire's image. Their eyes, once filled with hope and compassion, now mirror a void, an emptiness meticulously crafted by the dark side. A piercing silence permeates the chamber as Vader's cold gaze sweeps over his new recruits. The atmosphere is dense with suppressed energy and calculated malice. A holographic projection, its surface crackling with static and decay, illuminates the wall. It depicts shadowed figures fleeing from battle, desperate and disoriented, a stark reminder of the Jedi purge in full swing. This spectral record is not merely a chronicle of loss, it is a directive. The Inquisitors are to be the new Order's enforcers, purging every last vestige of the old light. Amid this somber assembly, the Dark Lord's voice, low and inexorable, reverberates through the chamber. Your past is irrelevant. Only the strength of the dark side remains. His words, delivered with a measured cadence, leave no room for dissent. Every syllable is a decree that seals their fate. They are no longer who they once were. They have been reborn as hunters of Jedi, destined to carry out the Emperor's final unyielding edict. A flicker of mechanized movement draws the eye to a set of training arenas where raw power and brutal precision are honed. Here, the newly formed Inquisitors engage in relentless drills designed not for honor or valor, but for suppression and destruction. Their lightsabers, reconfigured to burn a deep, blood-red hue, clash with the precision of a grim orchestra. Each strike is measured, every parry a calculated step toward complete mastery over their own inner darkness. The training is merciless, a crucible where hope is systematically extinguished and only the cold, unyielding hunger for power endures. In a quiet alcove beyond the main hall, an Imperial archivist meticulously documents these events. His data logs capture the somber transformation of promising young talents into instruments of fear. His voice, recorded in a hushed tone, notes, here, under Vader's uncompromising rule, the light is smothered. Every soul is reshaped into a vessel of the dark side, bound by duty and terror. His words serve as both record and omen, reminders of what is sacrificed in the pursuit of absolute control. As the indoctrination continues, the initiate witnesses Vader's private audience with a select few of these recruits. In a chamber adorned with stark angular designs and dim red luminescence, the Dark Lord reviews their progress with clinical detachment. His presence, formidable and unyielding, embodies the Empire's relentless ambition. He speaks of a future in which the Inquisitorius will not only hunt Jedi remnants, but also serve as instruments to quell any insurrection within the ranks of the Empire itself. His vision is clear: the eradication of all that represents the old order, replaced by a new regime of terror that will reshape the galaxy according to the Emperor's will. The transition from these initial grim formations to the wider war against the Jedi is both abrupt and inevitable. The camera of our narrative pans slowly across the crimson-lit corridors, capturing every detail of fear and determination etched into the faces of the Inquisitors. Their transformation is complete. They are no longer remnants of the past, but harbingers of a new era, one defined by ruthless efficiency and an unquenchable appetite for domination. As the final echo of Vader's voice fades into the oppressive silence of the installation, the scene shifts to the star-filled void beyond the Empire's reach. Here, the haunting images of fleeing Jedi and crumbling temples interlace with the relentless march of the Inquisitors. The galaxy itself seems to tremble at the birth of this new order, setting the stage for a conflict that will define the fate of countless worlds. Thus, the inception of the Inquisitorius stands as a monument to darkness, a chilling testament to how the loss of the Jedi and the rise of the Sith forged a path of despair. The narrative now turns toward the long road of persecution and survival that lies ahead, where the shadows of this ruthless order will stalk every corner of the galaxy. The birth of the Inquisitorius was not merely a military initiative, it was a psychological siege. With Vader as its hammer, the true chisel that shaped these hunters came from within. The second chapter of this whispered tale drifts deeper into that shadowed alchemy, where Jedi, once guardians of peace, were unraveled and rewoven into weapons of dread. It began not with capture, but with hesitation. In the ruins of Order 66, not all Jedi fell in battle. Some survived, wounded in spirit more than in flesh. They wandered, haunted, questioning the truths they had once held sacred. And in that chasm of uncertainty, the dark side found fertile ground. The Empire did not always need to hunt them. Often, it simply needed to wait. From the Outer Rim to forgotten moon temples, the Empire's agents scoured the galaxy for such Jedi. The broken, the disillusioned, the betrayed. Those who had watched comrades die beneath clone fire and could not reconcile their survival. They were not offered redemption. They were offered purpose. When they were brought to Fortress Inquisitorius, their lightsabers were not taken, only dimmed. The Empire did not seek to erase their pasts, but to weaponize them. These former protectors of life were subjected to rituals and trials that shattered their illusions. Their once pristine meditation chambers became places of torment. Guided by Sith overseers and Vader himself, their introspections were no longer paths to peace, but mazes of doubt, twisted memory, and pain. One Jedi, once known as Tabor Vallis, had meditated each morning to the sound of birdsong on Kashyyyk. Now, under the Empire's grasp, that same meditation was interrupted daily by the recorded screams of civilians, played on loop, reverberating through his cell. Over time, the screams became familiar, then ignorable, and eventually comforting. By the end of his transformation, Vallis, now the 10th brother, could not remember what peace had felt like. He only knew silence was a lie. The process was not uniform. Some recruits bent quickly, others shattered slowly. The most powerful candidates were those whose fall came with great resistance, because it meant their transformation would be absolute. The path from Jedi to Inquisitor was not a turn, but a spiral. It was the slow corruption of ideals, the erosion of trust in the Force itself. And then, the final rite, the change of blade. Each new Inquisitor was brought before the forge of Fortress Inquisitorius. There, under Vader's gaze, they were made to bleed their Kyber crystal. A sacred relic of the Jedi, the crystal resonated with the heart of its wielder. To corrupt it, to flood it with pain, hatred, and rage, was to destroy the last remnant of their former self. The Kyber resisted, screamed through the Force, but ultimately it bent. One by one, lightsabers, once golden, blue, or green, snapped into red with a sharp, piercing whine, like a wound being cauterized. The sound echoed through the halls like a funeral dirge. Not all could complete this rite. Some resisted the bleed. Some fled into madness. Those who survived, however, emerged reborn, not as Jedi, but as loyal dogs of the Empire. And Vader, ever watchful, ensured that each hunter was bound by more than just the Force. Through pain, through manipulation, through carefully orchestrated betrayal, they were yoked to him. He understood better than anyone that fear was the most lasting leash. The transformation was not only internal. Their features twisted, not from physical mutilation, but from the accumulation of emotional distortion. Serenity drained from their faces like water from broken glass. In its place, taut expressions, clenched jaws, eyes either lifeless or burning with spite. Some still wore fragments of their old Jedi robes, not in remembrance, but as a mockery of what they had left behind. They were given names not of honor, but of enumeration. The second sister, the fifth brother, the eighth brother. Titles that erased lineage, individuality, and pride. They were no longer people. They were tools. Designated roles in the machinery of dread. Their ranks grew slowly. Only the truly broken could be shaped. And yet, they became effective, their loyalty sharpened by pain and purpose. They knew the Jedi better than anyone. They knew how to find them, how to tempt them, how to unravel them. Still, not all was silent obedience. Within some of them flickered dying embers, memories, questions, guilt. A few, in the darkest hours of the night, still reached out through the Force, whispering apologies into the void. But the Empire made sure such whispers never reached far. The Inquisitors were not Sith. That path remained reserved for two. But they were something else. Phantoms of a fallen era, blades turned inward, corrupted echoes of the order they once served. And as they spread across the galaxy, hunting in pairs or small units, the true war began. Not of grand battles or fleets, but of shadow and whispers. Jedi were no longer simply being hunted by stormtroopers or probes. They were being pursued by those who once sat beside them in the temple, who knew their ways, who knew their hearts. The Force trembled quietly. Because what the Empire had done was not simply build assassins. It had weaponized memory. The Inquisitorius had its hunters. But every pack needs a leader, someone to carry the will of the Empire with precision, cruelty, and understanding. From the ashes of the Jedi Order, one such figure emerged, not through brute strength alone, but through obsession. The one who would become the Grand Inquisitor was never seduced by power, not in the traditional sense. His corruption was born of curiosity left untended, of questions that the Jedi refused to answer. Before the fall, he had been a temple guardian, a sentinel in golden mask and robes, sworn to defend the sacred Jedi archives in Coruscant's deepest halls, silent, stoic. But beneath that stillness burned frustration. For years, he stood watch over knowledge he was forbidden to read. Scrolls, holocrons, and tomes sealed under the High Council's authority, declared too dangerous, too seductive, too close to the dark. The Guardians were trusted with protection, not comprehension. And in that denial, resentment festered. He watched as masters passed him by, conversed in quiet tones about truths he would never touch. He witnessed contradictions in the Order's judgment. Blind eyes turned to politics, arrogance disguised as balance. He began to question, not the Force, but the gatekeepers of its wisdom. And in the end, it was not the Sith who planted the first seed of doubt. It was the Jedi themselves. When Order 66 turned Coruscant into a graveyard, the Temple Guardian did not die at his post. He lingered in the ruins, alone among the shattered statues and burned banners. As the fires dimmed, he descended into the restricted vaults of the archives, those very halls he had once only guarded. There, in the shadows, he consumed the knowledge once denied to him. Not all of it was Sith. Some of it was simply forbidden, secrets of the Force's primal nature, controversial philosophies long deemed heretical. It changed him, and that's when Darth Vader came. The Empire had no need for Guardians, but it had a place for someone who knew the inner workings of the Jedi Order, someone intimate with its records, rituals, and failings. Vader extended the offer, not with threats, but with acknowledgement. The Guardian's curiosity, once seen as dangerous by the Jedi, was welcomed by the Empire. He was told he could explore all truths, so long as he served one. The Guardian accepted. The mask came off. The robes were replaced by black armor trimmed with crimson. His weapon, once a standard Jedi blade, was reforged into a double-bladed saber, its core mounted to a gyroscopic ring. When activated, it spun with a mechanical whir, cutting through air and flesh alike. The design was theatrical, yes, but effective, terrifying. And his eyes, once patient and unreadable behind a golden visor, now shone yellow with corruption. Not rage, not madness, but clarity. The certainty of someone who believed he had transcended both Jedi and Sith. He wasn't following the dark side blindly. He thought he was mastering it. His first act as Grand Inquisitor was not to kill, but to rewrite. He began cataloging surviving Jedi, dissecting their methods, tactics, known weaknesses. His knowledge of Jedi doctrine made him a predator unlike any other. He anticipated their moves, predicted their hiding places, exposed their reliance on outdated creeds. He hunted with detachment, not malice. But that made his cruelty colder. Those who remembered him as a Temple Guardian never truly believed he could fall so far. And perhaps that was the point. His transformation was not a sudden descent. It was a redefinition of loyalty, of purpose. To him, the Jedi had betrayed their own ideals long before he ever did. They had feared knowledge. He embraced it. Under his leadership, the Inquisitorius became more than an enforcement branch. It became a mirror held up to the Jedi's failures. A reminder that the past had consequences, and those consequences had names. The Grand Inquisitor would not rule. He had no ambition for thrones. But in the darkness between stars, among whispers of Force sensitives still breathing, his name became legend, a cautionary tale told in hushed tones. And in Fortress Inquisitorius, his reign had only begun. A darkness unlike any before descended upon Jedha that fateful night, a prelude to horror that would mark the beginning of the Jedi Purge. In a forgotten quarter of the ancient city, Where crumbling temples still echoed with prayers of old, exiled Jedi had found solace. They gathered in silent meditation amid ruins, seeking refuge in the lingering wisdom of their fallen order. Unbeknownst to them, a sinister force moved in the shadows. The Initiate, who had long studied the transformation of former Guardians into relentless hunters, now turned his attention to the first major massacre orchestrated by the Inquisitors. A covert intelligence report, retrieved from a secret Imperial archive, recounted the ambush in chilling detail. As the night deepened, stormtroopers poured into the narrow cobblestone alleys of Jedha. Their armor glistened under the cold, harsh light of searchlights. Every step resounded like a death knell. In the gloom, the cadence of heavy boots, the hiss of drawn blasters, and the sharp clatter of gear merged into a relentless symphony of destruction. The exiled Jedi, lost in their meditative reverie, were caught unaware. One by one, the peaceful silence was shattered by the brutal intrusion. Monks, whose hearts had been steady and serene, fell in utter silence, each drop of their life a silent elegy to a hope now extinguished. The sacred ground, once a haven for healing and reflection, transformed in an instant into a grim battlefield. Amid the chaos, a lone figure emerged. A solitary Inquisitor, standing atop a crumbling tower, overlooking the ravaged streets. His presence was commanding. Clad in black armor and draped in a cloak that fluttered like a shadow in the wind, he surveyed the massacre with an expression as cold and unyielding as the void itself. With each passing moment, his red lightsaber hummed with lethal intent, its glow reflecting off broken statues and shattered relics. His eyes, hidden beneath a menacing hood, burned with a ruthless determination to erase every trace of the Jedi Order. The scene below was a tapestry of despair and desolation. Stormtroopers, coordinated with surgical precision, flooded every alley, their movements synchronized like the beating of a dark heart. The clamor of distant shouts, the crackle of blaster fire, and the soft, resigned groans of those caught in the ambush intertwined into a haunting refrain. The Initiate's voice, low and measured, whispered the tragic truth. The hunt had begun, and no sanctuary was safe. As the Inquisitors advanced, the once peaceful meditative enclave was consumed by fear and devastation. Jedi who had sought solace in their ancient teachings were reduced to fleeting silhouettes, their final moments swallowed by darkness. The lone Inquisitor on the tower raised his saber high, a signal that reverberated through the collapsing alleys, a proclamation that loyalty to the Empire was enforced through fear and relentless action. His gaze swept over the ruins, each fallen figure a testament to the Empire's resolve to extinguish the light. In that chilling instant, the Initiate felt the weight of a turning point, a moment when the delicate balance of hope and despair tilted irreversibly toward a future ruled by tyranny. The echoes of the massacre on Jedha would reverberate throughout the galaxy, becoming a grim legend etched into the lore of both the Empire and the remnants of the Jedi. This violent night marked the beginning of a long, dark campaign, a relentless purge that would force the Jedi into exile and drive them into the hidden corners of the universe. Slowly, the chaos subsided into an oppressive stillness. The once vibrant city now lay in ruins, a silent mausoleum to a fallen order. The lone Inquisitor's silhouette remained on the tower as if carved in stone, a lasting reminder that the Empire's grip was absolute. His red blade, still humming in the quiet, illuminated the wreckage with a macabre beauty, a symbol of the new era of fear. Thus, The legacy of Jedha's bloodshed was sealed, a dark prologue to the relentless hunt that would soon engulf the galaxy, leaving behind a trail of sorrow and whispered legends of what was lost. The silence left in the wake of Jedha's massacre did not last. It never did. For those who bore the insignia of the Inquisitorius, still wet with the blood of Jedi, the aftermath was not a celebration, but a lesson. The true crucible awaited them not on the battlefield, but in the training chambers of the fortress Inquisitorius, and in the shadow of their master. The fortress, hidden on the oceanic moon of Nur, was not simply a base. It was a forge. Beneath its obsidian walls and roaring tides, Darth Vader honed his hunters, not with lessons, but with agony. There was no curriculum, no wisdom passed from master to apprentice as the Jedi once had. Here, knowledge came only through suffering. The chambers where Inquisitors were trained pulsed with danger. The floors bore the scorch marks of 1,000 failed counters. The walls were soundproofed to muffle the endless screams. The scent of burnt metal and charred flesh hung in the air, a bitter perfume that clung to the skin. Vader never offered praise, only pain. He descended upon his students like a storm, cloaked in black, breathing like a machine too angry to die. His silhouette, cast against the firelight of training pits, became a symbol of inevitability. They knew it well. If he walked into the chamber, someone would not walk out. The trials he set were simple in concept, impossible in practice. Duels, where hesitation meant mutilation. Exercises in precision under pressure, made infinitely harder by Vader's presence. He would engage them one by one, or sometimes all at once, wielding his crimson saber with a terrifying economy of motion. But it was not the blade they feared most. It was the Force. The moment they faltered, if a parry was too slow, a block too weak, Vader would reach out. Invisible hands crushed windpipes, bent limbs, hurled bodies like rag dolls. Inquisitors found themselves suspended in the air, limbs twitching violently under the strain of Force pressure. Bones snapped, masks shattered. Screams filled the chamber before falling into abrupt silence. Some called it training. Most called it torment. The younger recruits, many of them former Padawans, who had been seduced or coerced into the order, learned quickly that mercy did not exist here. Some tried to resist him, to fight with conviction. Those lasted the shortest. The Grand Inquisitor watched from the sidelines, his face impassive. He had long since understood the lesson. Survival depended on complete surrender. Not to Vader, but to fear itself. Where once Jedi had relied on trust and balance, the Inquisitorius was ruled by dread and domination. This was no brotherhood. It was a hierarchy of pain. There was no room for friendship, no alliances, only endurance. Vader's methods were cruel, but they served a purpose. Under his merciless instruction, the Inquisitors became instruments of terror, not just tools of war. They learned to strike not merely at bodies, but at minds, using fear as a scalpel, instability as a weapon. Every duel, every trial, etched deeper into their psyche the truth Vader had long accepted. The only constant was pain, and the only victory was survival. One night, as the sea raged outside and the training pits glowed with fire, Vader summoned them again. This time, he said nothing. No command, no threat. He ignited his blade, and the air itself seemed to recoil. The lesson was clear. They fought, and bled, and screamed. When it ended, several lay broken on the floor, some breathing, others not. Vader turned without a word, his cape trailing across the scorched metal. Behind him, the Inquisitors remained kneeling. They had passed the lesson, not because they had bested him, but because they had survived him. And in the Empire, that was all that mattered. Within the austere corridors of Fortress Inquisitorius, where the relentless echo of pain and ambition is etched into every cold surface, a complex web of identities takes shape. The Inquisitors, once mere remnants of a shattered order, have now been twisted into a cadre of hunters, each forged by their own dark past, each driven by ambitions that both bind and betray them. Here, in the dim, oppressive light, rivalries and whispered oaths form the backbone of a brutal fraternity where survival is earned in secrecy and scars. In the labyrinth of stone passages and echoing chambers, the initiate encounters subtle marks left by those who came before, a series of codes carved into walls, serving as silent testaments to loyalty and despair. These symbols, etched with precision into the hardened masonry, are not mere decorations. They are the chronicles of individual fates, each stroke representing a promise made in hushed tones. The air vibrates with unspoken oaths that echo through the darkened halls, binding the Inquisitors to one another while fueling simmering rivalries. Each member of this fearsome group carries a haunted past, a memory of a life once lived under the light, now extinguished. Some remember the gentle calm of Jedi training. Others, the bitter sting of betrayal in the midst of Order 66. Such memories, once a source of hope, have become burdens that twist ambition into a perilous drive. For every Inquisitor, the call of the dark side is a double-edged sword. It grants them power while simultaneously damning them to an existence where the ghosts of their former selves constantly whisper of what was lost. Within this circle of blades drawn inward, the rivalry among the Inquisitors is palpable. They do not merely compete for favor or recognition. They challenge one another to confront the raw truth of their own corruption. In quiet moments, when the cacophony of their training subsides into an uneasy silence, sharp words are exchanged in whispers. Rival Inquisitors debate tactics and past transgressions, each conversation a delicate balance of admiration and envy. Their voices, low and measured, carry the weight of unsaid judgments and the promise of inevitable retribution. Amid these turbulent relationships, one particular figure stands out. A mentor whose own ambition has become both his strength and his curse. His eyes, once reflective and kind, now burn with an unyielding intensity, a fire stoked by years of accumulated pain and relentless duty. His presence commands respect. Yet beneath the veneer of disciplined ferocity, there lurks a vulnerability that only a few dare to acknowledge. In a rare moment of solitude, he is seen tracing the ancient codes on a wall with trembling fingers, as if seeking solace in the silent testimony of those who came before. His gaze, fixed on the dark etchings, reveals a yearning for absolution that his ruthless exterior belies. Throughout the fortress, the interplay of loyalty and betrayal weaves a tapestry of human frailty amidst the cold precision of Sith doctrine. The initiate observes as a pair of Inquisitors spar in a secluded training chamber. Their lightsabers clash in a burst of red, the sound sharp and discordant, punctuating the silence with the echo of ambition. Every strike, every parry, mirrors the internal struggle of a soul caught between the remnants of their former ideals and the inescapable lure of darkness. This relentless pursuit of power, while unifying in its brutality, isolates each Inquisitor in a private battle against the memories they cannot shed. The fortress itself becomes a crucible where individual ambitions are tempered by the harsh realities of their shared fate. Their names, now mere designations, such as second sister or eighth brother, are stripped of identity, leaving behind only the roles they must play in an order that thrives on fear. As the day wanes and the dim light shifts to deeper shadows, the initiate senses that the Inquisitor's internal strife mirrors the greater conflict engulfing the galaxy. Their rivalries and whispered oaths, so carefully nurtured by years of torment and training, are but a microcosm of the eternal struggle between order and chaos. In that reflective quiet, the initiate understands that these haunted souls, with their ambition both their weapon and their wound, are destined to leave an indelible mark on the destiny of the Empire. Stepping out into a narrow corridor, the initiate carries with him the weight of these revelations. The bonds forged in pain, the secrets etched in stone, and the rivalries that twist ambition into darkness, all converge to form a legacy of terror. Yet even amid such relentless torment, a spark of defiance remains. It is a promise that in the depths of suffering, there is still the potential for change. A hope that one day, even these lost souls might reclaim a fragment of the light they once knew. Emerging from the cold corridors where bitter rivalries and whispered oaths had defined the Inquisitors, a new spectre began to haunt the dark tapestry of the Empire's relentless hunt. In a distant, snow-covered village on a forgotten world, a lone warrior forged her own path, one that neither the Jedi nor the Sith could fully claim. This was Ahsoka Tano, whose defiant choice to walk away from both orders left an indelible mark on the galaxy. Her rejection of both light and dark had transformed her into a living enigma, a threat that unsettled even the most hardened Inquisitors. As twilight fell over the icy landscape, the village lay cloaked in silence, its white expanse a stark contrast to the heated chaos of battle that raged elsewhere. Here, under a canopy of twinkling stars and a sky painted with the soft glow of a distant nebula, Ahsoka moved like a wraith. Her blue lightsaber, an echo of a past steeped in conflict, danced through the darkness with a grace that belied its deadly purpose. Its cool radiance cut sharply through the cold, silent air, a beacon of resistance in a world that had long surrendered to fear. Reports began to trickle in from across the sector, whispers of a solitary figure whose very presence caused the Inquisitors to falter. In one remote outpost, a squad of Inquisitors, their armor once imposing and resolute, were forced into retreat as they encountered Ahsoka's unexpected defiance. Their calculated pursuit dissolved into chaos as they struggled to comprehend how a former Jedi could operate outside the confines of their corrupted doctrine. Her movements, swift and elusive, evoked the memories of a brighter past, a reminder of the legacy that the Order had once upheld. The initiate, who had been meticulously chronicling the dark metamorphosis of the Inquisitorius, now listened intently to these fragmented accounts. Each testimony painted a picture of a warrior unbound by allegiance, whose methods were as unpredictable as they were profound. One story described how, amid a narrow, snow-dusted street, a pair of Inquisitors found themselves disoriented by the flicker of blue light darting across the frost. Another recounted the sight of a lone Ahsoka standing atop a ruined monument, her gaze calm and resolute as she surveyed a scene of devastation, her saber a silent promise of defiance. It was clear that Ahsoka's path was one of quiet revolution. Unlike the brutal tactics of the Inquisitors, her struggle was measured and reflective, a battle fought in the subtle interplay of shadow and illumination. In her eyes, the scars of betrayal and loss were tempered by a steadfast resolve to remain true to a code that transcended institutional dogma. The gentle cadence of her presence inspired hope among those who had slipped into despair, and her actions kindled a spark in the hearts of even the most downtrodden souls. In the frigid stillness of the snowy village, the initiate witnessed how the fabric of conflict could be unraveled by a single act of courageous independence. Ahsoka's defiant maneuvers on the battlefield left a trail of disarray among the Inquisitors. Their formation, once precise and terrifying, broke like brittle ice under her unexpected counterstrikes. The sound of clashing sabers echoed softly in the night, soon giving way to hurried retreats and disorganized murmurs, a stark contrast to the cold precision with which she had once defended her former order. Yet, despite her solitude, the threat of her influence loomed large. The Inquisitors, bitter and unyielding, recognized that her very existence undermined the Empire's claim to order. The delicate balance they sought to enforce had been disrupted by a force that refused to be categorized, a remnant of a purer, less corrupted past. Her legacy was not one of destruction alone, but of quiet rebellion, a reminder that hope could flicker even in the deepest shadows. As the night deepened and the cold embraced the land, the initiate stepped back from the scene, his mind swirling with the echoes of Ahsoka's defiant presence. The lone warrior had become both a symbol of resistance and a mirror reflecting the failures of those who had succumbed to darkness. Her shadow, cast across the snowy expanse, promised that even when the empire of fear seemed all-consuming, the light of a single unbound spirit could still ignite change. With this realization echoing in his heart, the initiate prepared for the next chapter in his chronicle, a deeper exploration into the secret hidden paths of surviving Jedi and the legacy they would forge in the face of unyielding tyranny. In the wake of Ahsoka's defiant departure, the galaxy's darkness deepened in unexpected ways. Whispers of her passage had unsettled the Inquisitors, but one was dispatched to erase a hidden Jedi enclave, a sanctuary rumored to cradle ancient wisdom. This mission, intended as another victory for the Empire, instead led a lone Inquisitor down a path of harrowing revelation. His journey brought him to a long-forgotten temple, a place where the past refused to be silenced, and the Force revealed its deepest sorrows. The temple, carved from black basalt and draped in twisting vines, loomed against a blood-tinged sky. Its once proud arches were now broken and weathered, and the corridors inside echoed with the lament of time. As the Inquisitor stepped through the threshold, the atmosphere grew heavy with an indescribable melancholy. Every footstep on the cold stone floor resonated with ancient grief, as if the temple itself wept for its lost custodians. Within the main hall, a series of statues, once grand and inspiring, now stood fractured. Their faces, once etched in noble relief, dripped with streams of what appeared to be blood, a silent testimony to the temple's tragic past. The Inquisitor's eyes narrowed as he scanned the chamber. The statues' sorrowful expressions contrasted sharply with his purpose, and their silent cries began to erode his resolve. As he moved deeper into the temple, the flicker of lightsabers caught his attention. Not the steady beam of his own weapon, but erratic flashes that seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. The illumination danced on the cracked surfaces, creating shifting patterns that confused his senses and disoriented his focus. Every flash held a momentary glimpse of figures, fleeting images of Jedi long dead, their forms etched in agony and defiance. The sound of his own breathing mixed with a low, persistent hum, as though the Force itself was murmuring secrets from beneath the stone. A series of corridors led him to a vast, circular chamber. Here, the air was colder, and the oppressive silence was broken only by the echo of distant voices. These were not the voices of living beings, but spectral echoes that rose from the very bedrock of the temple. They spoke in hushed tones, words filled with sorrow and warnings of ancient battles fought long ago. The Inquisitor felt the edges of his sanity fray as the voices wove into his mind, each syllable a reminder of loss and betrayal. In one moment, the chamber's shadows coalesced into a vision, a ghostly reenactment of a massacre, where Jedi fought desperately and then fell in silent unison. The vision was so vivid that he could almost feel the despair that had permeated those final moments. A lone Jedi, his eyes bright with determination, yet heavy with resignation, raised his lightsaber in a futile gesture of defiance. The blade flickered erratically, its light dying as quickly as it ignited, as if echoing the fleeting hope of those who had perished. The Inquisitor staggered under the weight of this revelation. Every detail, the blood weeping from stone, the spectral sabers that danced in chaotic rhythm, the mournful voices wove together into a tapestry of anguish that threatened to consume him. His mind, already scarred by his own dark memories, reeled from the intensity of the Force's lament. Here in the temple, the distinction between life and death blurred, and the ancient sorrow of the Jedi felt as if it were his own. Struggling to maintain his focus, he recalled his orders to eradicate this enclave without mercy. Yet, in the midst of the overwhelming grief, a question emerged. Had the temple become a guardian of something more profound than mere resistance? Was it a repository of lost truths, preserved not by the Inquisitor's terror, but by the weight of memory? The vision began to recede as the spectral chorus softened, leaving him alone with the echoes of the past. In the dim light of the chamber, the Inquisitor's resolve wavered. He recognized that the voices of these ancient Jedi were not empty phantoms, but a reminder of the eternal cost of the Empire's cruelty, a cost that even he could no longer fully ignore. As he exited the temple, the cold night air enveloped him. The silent screams of the structure and the flickering remnants of lightsabers lingered in his mind like a final elegy. He carried with him not only the scars of his own darkness, but a burgeoning realization that in the ruins of despair there may lie the seeds of redemption for a galaxy lost. A chill crept over the training halls of the Inquisitorius, as the echoes of brutality and indoctrination faded into an unsettling silence. In one shadowed corridor, a sister, once a promising Jedi youngling, whose laughter had once filled sunlit academies, now bore the weight of a tortured past. Her face, marred by scars both visible and hidden, told a story of betrayal and sorrow. In that moment, doubt, a foreign emotion in the ruthless world of the Inquisitors, began to bloom within her. Long ago, as a child, she had embraced the warmth of the Jedi teachings, her spirit alight with hope and wonder. But that innocence had been shattered by the grim reality of Order 66 and the subsequent rise of the Inquisitorius. The memory of peaceful training, of mentors who had nurtured her spirit with gentle guidance, was now interwoven with the horrors of a purge. Each day, the harsh regimen of darkness forced her to suppress the lingering vestiges of her former self. Yet, in the quiet recesses of her heart, a single tear, an emblem of what she had lost, refused to be forgotten. That tear, a silent testimony to the life she once knew, became the spark of her rebellion. In the heat of a training duel meant to crush all dissent, the sister hesitated. Her lightsaber, usually a tool of ruthless precision, wavered in her trembling grasp. As she parried a vicious strike from her counterpart, her eyes flashed with a momentary clarity, a glimpse of the light that had been extinguished long ago. The memory of warm laughter and serene meditation surged within her, igniting a fierce internal conflict that the dark side had long sought to eradicate. In that split second, she turned her blade not against the enemy, but against those who had forged her into this instrument of fear. Mid-combat, amid the clash of red sabers and the echoing shouts of her fellow Inquisitors, she launched a sudden, desperate attack. Her strikes, fueled by a surge of defiance and raw emotion, were unpredictable and wild. The silence that followed her initial betrayal was deafening. A momentary lapse where the normal cadence of violence was replaced by a still, piercing pause. Faces around her twisted in shock and disbelief as the sister, once bound by unwavering obedience, broke away from the regimented ranks. In that instant, her eyes, which had been dull and resigned, shone with a fragile, unyielding light. The glimmer of her defiance cut through the murk of indoctrination like a shard of crystal. Inquisitors who had been her comrades now found themselves compelled to halt their advance, caught between duty and the shock of her betrayal. The ensuing melee was chaotic. Blasters fired into the frigid air, and the rhythmic hum of red sabers clashed against a backdrop of harsh metallic clamor. Yet amidst the bedlam, the sister's actions were singular and resolute. Every strike she delivered was punctuated by the memory of a kinder past, a moment of softness in a world hardened by cruelty. The silence in the immediate wake of her rebellion was profound. Even the steady beat of combat seemed to falter as the gravity of her choice rippled through the hall. Her defiance, however, came at a dire cost. Within moments, the coordinated forces of the Inquisitorius, trained to suppress any sign of weakness, closed in with ruthless efficiency. As the battle raged, the sister fought with a desperate grace, her every movement a clash between the remnant of her old self and the dark shell she had been forced to inhabit. Her blade, now a symbol of defiant hope, sliced through the air, its brilliant arc a stark contrast to the encroaching gloom. But the Inquisitors, unyielding in their purpose, would not tolerate insubordination. In a fateful turn, betrayal from those she once trusted shattered the fragile spark of her rebellion. A trusted comrade, whose own eyes had long been clouded by darkness, struck her from behind. The blow was swift and brutal, a betrayal that silenced the lone cry of defiance echoing in the empty corridor. The sister crumpled to the cold floor, her tear of rebellion mingling with the blood that stained the stone. As the echoes of her struggle faded into the oppressive silence, the Inquisitors gathered around, their expressions a mix of hardened resolve and grim regret. The cost of doubt, they now understood, was a heavy burden, one that could shatter a soul entirely. The chilling stillness in the corridor bore witness to her sacrifice. Where there should have been triumphant cries, there was only the quiet aftermath of devastation. In that moment, the initiate, hidden in the shadows and recording the dark lessons unfolding, felt a pang of sorrow and warning. The sister's fate was not an isolated incident, but a somber reminder that even the faintest spark of dissent in the Inquisitorius was met with swift, merciless retribution. Her act of rebellion, brief and tragic, was etched into the cold stone of the fortress, a permanent scar on the legacy of those who hunted in the name of order. Slowly, the echoes of her sacrifice merged with the ever-present hum of the Force. The silence that followed, heavy with the weight of unspoken truths, signaled that the price of doubt had been exacted. Yet it also kindled a quiet hope that even in the deepest corruption, the seeds of defiance might one day bloom into rebellion. As the Inquisitors resumed their grim duties, their faces masked in darkness and regret, the initiate stepped away, burdened yet enlightened by the cost of that solitary act. The lesson was clear. To question the inevitable was to risk everything. For in a system built on unyielding terror, even a single tear could ignite a revolution, and yet it might also be extinguished with ruthless finality. A heavy silence settled over the darkened corridors of Fortress Inquisitorius as the night deepened outside. The echoes of earlier trials and whispered rebellions still lingered, yet now a new storm was about to be unleashed. A storm born from the unyielding will of Darth Vader. In this final chapter of the Inquisitorius's early days, the Dark Lord stepped forward to enforce loyalty in a manner both brutal and unmistakable. In a secluded chamber, where red luminescence seeped from hidden recesses and the metallic scent of fear permeated the air, a traitor had been discovered. Among the ranks of Inquisitors, one had allowed doubt to fester. A sister whose heart, once hardened by indoctrination, now harbored remnants of a long-forgotten compassion. Her hesitation had not gone unnoticed. Her failure to adhere completely to the creed was an affront to the Emperor's order, a weakness that the dark side would not tolerate. Vader entered the chamber like a spectre of death. His presence, immense and oppressive, cast long shadows over the trembling Inquisitors, assembled for what would be a grim reminder of their purpose. The air grew colder as he advanced, his breathing the only sound breaking the uneasy stillness. Every step he took was measured, each pause heavy with silent menace. The traitor's eyes widened in terror as the Dark Lord's silhouette filled the doorway, the red glow of his lightsaber reflecting off his blackened armor. Without a word, Vader ignited his saber, a searing, crimson blade that cut through the darkness with ruthless precision. The traitor tried to speak, her voice a brittle whisper of "My lord." But it was lost amid the sudden, violent clashing of metal and the surge of raw force energy. In a single, swift motion, Vader struck. The saber's arc was a brilliant, fatal curve, a luminous red stroke that obliterated the last vestiges of her former self. As the weapon connected, a final, breathless cry echoed in the chamber, then faded into silence. The traitor fell, her eyes vacant, her body crumpled into a lifeless heap on the cold floor. Around the room, the other Inquisitors recoiled in horror and awe. Their faces, once twisted in loyalty, now reflected a mix of terror and reluctant obedience. Vader's message was clear. Loyalty was enforced not through reward, but through fear. He turned his gaze slowly across the gathered ranks, each pair of eyes wide with the realization that their master's wrath was not an occasional outburst, but an ever-present force that would dictate their fate. The Dark Lord's voice, deep and resonant, finally broke the silence. You serve only through your submission. Failure to obey is not an option. His tone was devoid of pity, each syllable laden with the weight of absolute power. The chamber seemed to shudder with his words, and the very walls absorbed the sound, as if the fortress itself were complicit in his decree. In the aftermath, as Vader's figure receded into the gloom, the surviving Inquisitors gathered in a grim circle. The atmosphere was heavy with dread. Whispers of fear mingled with the sound of labored breaths. The memory of the traitor's swift end, marked by the brilliant flash of a red blade, seared itself into the minds of every soul present. It was a spectacle of ruthless clarity, a demonstration that the path of the dark side was paved with uncompromising discipline and the merciless eradication of weakness. Within that circle, a few Inquisitors dared to meet each other's gaze. Their expressions revealed the seeds of doubt and regret, yet the lesson had been forced upon them. There could be no compromise, no mercy when it came to the dark side's dominion. Each had been selected for their potential, but now their true nature was being tested. In this crucible of terror, the only currency was obedience, and the only virtue was fear. As the final echo of Vader's decree faded into the cold stone corridors, the initiate, hidden in the periphery, recorded every detail with a heavy heart. He understood that the Empire's strength was built upon these dark foundations, each act of brutality a stepping stone toward an order where loyalty was carved in blood. The image of Vader's unyielding presence, the final cry of the traitor, and the terror in the eyes of his new minions would remain etched in the annals of the Inquisitorius. It was a lesson in how absolute power annihilates dissent, how fear becomes the true master. The chamber's oppressive silence gradually gave way to the low murmur of measured footsteps and subdued voices as the surviving Inquisitors dispersed. The scene outside, lit by the cold light of distant stars, bore witness to the Empire's inexorable march forward, a march that would not be halted by hesitation or doubt. The traitor's fate was sealed as a warning to all. In the service of the Emperor, there is no room for wavering resolve. With the memory of Vader's wrath lingering in the air like a bitter perfume, the initiate left the chamber. His mind churned with the grim lesson that the path of the dark side was as unforgiving as it was relentless. In the shadow of the Inquisitorius's birth, every heartbeat, every breath was a reminder that true power demanded absolute loyalty, a price measured in fear and enforced with cold precision. But while the galaxy seemed lost to darkness, and the hunters grew in power, whispers remained, faint signals in the Force, lives that refused to extinguish. And so we shift now, from the shadows of the hunters to the last lights in exile. In the deep corridors of time, when the darkness of Order 66 spread like an unseen plague, one Padawan found himself at the very heart of betrayal. The night was not marked by grand battles or heroic last stands, but by a desperate scramble to escape a fate foretold. In this retelling, the initiate's voice recounts the final hours of that tragic night from the perspective of a lone survivor, a young Jedi whose destiny was irrevocably altered by the treachery of those he had once called brothers. It began in the dim light of the Jedi temple, where the tranquility of meditation gave way to the staccato rhythm of blaster fire. The Padawan, his heart still full of hope, his eyes wide with the innocence of youth, watched in horror as clone troopers, once trusted allies, turned their weapons against their masters. The sudden shift was as violent as it was swift. Jedi fell in silent, unceremonious drops down narrow corridors. The sound of ignited sabers clashing and then falling silent echoed like a dirge through the once hallowed halls. With little time to comprehend the magnitude of the betrayal, the young Padawan was forced to abandon everything he had known. His lightsaber, a symbol of the light he once embraced, was flung aside in the chaos. He scrambled over rubble and shattered glass, guided only by instinct and the dim, distant hum of the Force. In the midst of the turmoil, the echoes of his fallen brethren resonated in his mind. A mix of soft, sorrowful murmurs and the harsh sounds of a life ending abruptly. The night outside was a tapestry of flickering stars, each one a silent witness to the tragedy unfolding below. As the Padawan bolted through a labyrinth of corridors, the cool, indifferent void of space beckoned with a promise of escape. His small, battered starship, hidden away on a remote landing pad, offered a chance at survival. The desperate rush to reach it was punctuated by the shattering of glass, and the distant roar of clashing blasters, a cacophony that would haunt him for years to come. In a narrow passage lit by the pale glow of emergency lights, the Padawan caught a glimpse of his former mentor, a venerable Jedi master, falling gracefully as if in slow motion, a figure of serene sorrow against the backdrop of violence. The sight was both heart-wrenching and surreal, a moment frozen in time that embodied the tragedy of Order 66. He clutched his side as the impact of that vision tore through him, and he pressed on, fueled by a desperate will to survive. Outside, the starry expanse shimmered as the Padawan boarded his stolen vessel. The engines roared to life, and the craft lifted from the ground with a violent shudder. Through the viewport, he watched as the temple receded into the distance, a burning silhouette swallowed by the sprawling darkness. The stars streaked past in brilliant, ghostly lines, carrying with them the last vestiges of his shattered past. Amid the rush of hyperspace, his thoughts turned inward. The betrayal, the sudden loss of all he had ever known, had ignited in him a fierce, painful determination to endure, no matter the cost. As the vessel sailed through the starry void, the Padawan's mind replayed the night's events with a clarity that bordered on agony. He remembered the cold, unfeeling eyes of the clones, the way their loyalty had turned to ruthless efficiency. He recalled the silence of his comrades as they fell, their lives extinguished without ceremony, and he felt the weight of every fallen soul, a burden that pressed upon him as he navigated the perilous path to exile. This singular escape, however, was not a promise of redemption. Instead, it was the beginning of a long, arduous journey, a life forced into the shadows, where the light of the Jedi was no longer a guiding star, but a distant memory. The galaxy had changed irrevocably on that night. The Order was shattered, and its survivors were scattered like stardust across the cosmos. The Padawan, now alone and hunted, carried with him not only the trauma of that fateful night, but also the seed of a hope that flickered weakly in the darkness. In that lonely voyage through hyperspace, amidst the streaks of starfire and the cold, infinite silence, he vowed that he would survive. For even as the Empire's cold grip tightened and the legacy of betrayal spread like a curse, there remained in the heart of the Force a promise, a whisper of resistance that could one day rekindle the light. Though his path would be long and perilous, his determination would be the spark that defied the darkness. The memory of that night, etched in every fleeting moment of silence and every burst of starlight, would forever serve as a reminder of what was lost. Yet, in his solitude, he also recognized that survival meant carrying the spark of hope into a future where the hidden Jedi might rise once again, a future where, even in exile, the light could outlast the darkness. As the stolen starship hurtled through the void, the Padawan clutched a small token, a pendant once given by his master, symbolizing the bond of a fading past and the promise of a new dawn. His journey had just begun, and though the galaxy now lay in a state of quiet despair, the final chapter of Order 66 was yet unwritten. Beyond the smoldering ruins of betrayal and terror, a solitary figure roams the outer rim, a Jedi Knight who has renounced the physical symbol of his power. Once, his lightsaber blazed as a beacon of hope and justice, but the scars of a shattered order have driven him to forsake its glow. Now he treads dusty, forgotten roads with quiet resolve, his very presence evoking legends whispered in the wind. In the barren expanse of a distant desert planet, where ancient stone and shifting sands merge into a timeless horizon, villagers speak in hushed tones of a mysterious wanderer. They tell stories of a man whose eyes, reflective and deep as twilight, harbor memories of a bygone era. His demeanor, calm yet burdened by loss, suggests a heart still beating with hope. The knight wears simple, worn robes that bear the marks of years spent in exile, and although his hands remain empty, his soul carries the weight of his former calling. He roams these remote regions, intent on solitude, deliberately refusing to ignite his saber, a decision born of anguish and the desire to forget the bloodshed of his past. The weapon, once a proud extension of his spirit, now lies dormant, its power stilled in a bid for inner peace. Yet fate, as it often does, conspires to disrupt even the most determined resolutions. One evening, beneath a vast, starlit sky, the knight finds himself alone on a dusty road. Villagers peer from shuttered windows, their whispers filled with both admiration and trepidation. Amid the cool stillness of the night, the soft luminescence of a crescent moon reveals an abandoned marketplace. Here, the knight pauses, and for a fleeting moment, his eyes betray a flicker of conflict, a hidden desire to reclaim what he once renounced. In that moment, as if stirred by the relentless pulse of destiny, the dormant blade stirs within him. The air shimmers with anticipation, and a subtle blue radiance begins to glow at his fingertips. The awakening is not a declaration of war, but a quiet acknowledgement that the path of peace sometimes requires a single, decisive act, a choice that bridges past wounds and the promise of a future yet to be written. The knight's journey becomes a solitary pilgrimage. With every cautious step on the dusty road, memories resurface of training in the quiet halls of the Jedi temple, of moments filled with light and laughter, and of the deep sorrow wrought by betrayal. These recollections, like scattered fragments of an old song, remind him that even in exile, he remains a guardian of the legacy he once cherished. As he continues along the winding path, the knight is drawn toward a derelict outpost bathed in the gentle glow of moonlight. Here, he meets an elderly traveler who speaks of forgotten lore and the true meaning of sacrifice. Their conversation is brief, yet profound, a series of soft, deliberate words that resonate with the heartbeat of the Force. The traveler tells him that sometimes one must reclaim the lost light, not to destroy the past, but to nurture it so that hope may once again flourish in even the darkest of times. Stirred by this encounter, the knight contemplates the burden of his decision. The weight of choice presses upon him, a choice between permanent retreat and the possibility of renewal. As he stands at a crossroads beneath a vault of glimmering stars, he surveys the silent world around him. Every grain of sand and every whisper of wind seems to murmur of destiny's inexorable call. The path ahead is uncertain, yet his resolve hardens like the ancient stone beneath his feet. With slow, deliberate motion, he reaches for his hilt. The lightsaber ignites with a soft, cool blue flame that illuminates his scarred face. Its glow is gentle, yet resolute, a promise that the power he once shunned now might be harnessed to protect rather than to destroy. The reawakened blade casts dancing reflections on the weathered walls of the outpost, a symbol of the knight's internal transformation from exile to reluctant guardian. The villagers, hearing the renewed hum of the saber, watch from afar in awe. In that moment, the knight becomes more than a wandering soul. He is a living myth, a beacon in the night that bridges the painful past with the uncertain future. His choice, born of both sorrow and hope, embodies the eternal truth that sometimes to heal one must confront the shadows and reclaim the light. And so, beneath the silent gaze of the cosmos and along the lonely roads of the Outer Rim, the wandering blade sets forth once again. His journey, marked by the delicate interplay of memory and destiny, promises not merely survival, but the rekindling of hope. A hope that will one day restore balance to a galaxy long lost in darkness. Beneath the restless surface of Mon Cala's vast, churning ocean, a secret sanctuary of Jedi endures. A haven hidden in the watery depths, where light is a rare and fragile treasure. After the tumultuous journeys across blasted deserts and broken outposts, a band of exiled Jedi has taken refuge in this submerged world. Far removed from the ceaseless gaze of the Empire, they live in silence and secrecy, knowing that even the softest ripple may signal danger. Their sanctuary is carved into ancient underwater caverns where natural rock formations blend with vibrant coral reefs. Murky beams of filtered light struggle to penetrate the deep, creating an ever-changing interplay of shadow and luminescence. In these hidden halls, the Jedi have fashioned a refuge from the chaos above. Here, every breath is carefully held, every movement measured, for the ocean is not only a shield, but a constant reminder of vulnerability. The initiate, tasked with chronicling the exiled order's secret existence, recalls the perilous journey that led them here. In battered submersibles cloaked in stealth, the Jedi navigated treacherous currents and labyrinthine passages beneath the surface. Their vessel glided silently past schools of bioluminescent creatures and ancient ruins that hinted at civilizations long forgotten. Along the way, whispered legends spoke of a time when the Force itself had been more fluid, when light and dark danced together without fear. Now, in this deep refuge, those ancient echoes seem to persist, woven into the very fabric of the water. Within the heart of the sanctuary, the exiled Jedi convene in quiet conclaves. In a spacious cavern, walls adorned with intricate patterns formed naturally by coral and stone, a small council gathers. Their voices are soft and measured, barely above a murmur, as they discuss hidden lore and share memories of a lost order. Here, the teachings of the old masters blend with the raw experience of exile. Each word, each gesture, is imbued with the weight of survival and the hope for a future where the light may once again flourish. A particular scene etches itself in the initiate's mind. In one secluded chamber, a solitary Jedi meditates before a mural carved into the rock. The painting, though faded by time, portrays a luminous lightsaber partially obscured by twisting coral. Its hilt, worn smooth by countless years, symbolizes the enduring legacy of those who fought to protect the light. The Jedi's eyes remain closed in deep concentration as he becomes one with the subtle currents of the Force that flow through the water. Around him, the silence is palpable, broken only by the soft, rhythmic pulse of distant marine life. A quiet symphony that underscores the fragile beauty of existence beneath the waves. Yet in this serene isolation, the ever-present threat of exposure looms large. Every tremor of the ocean, every slight change in the current, carries the potential to betray their hidden sanctuary. The exiled Jedi have learned to listen to the murmurs of the deep, a language of water and stillness that warns of danger. Their survival depends on an unyielding vigilance, a delicate balance between isolation and the need to remain connected to the Force. In the quiet moments before dawn, when the ocean's surface reflects the first tentative glow of a new day, the initiate wanders among the ruins. He observes ancient artifacts scattered like relics of a bygone era, broken holocrons, fragmented scrolls, and medallions worn by those who once walked openly in the light. Each object is a silent testament to the order that was lost and the wisdom that still endures, preserved within these hidden depths. The sanctuary of Mon Cala is more than a refuge. It is a living archive of resistance, a repository of secrets that defy the oppressive reach of the Empire. It is here, amid the murky lights and the breathless quiet of the deep, that the exiled Jedi cling to hope. Their hidden existence is a bold defiance against a galaxy determined to extinguish the light. As the initiate steps away from a quiet alcove filled with relics and memories, he feels the pulse of the Force in this submerged world, a reminder that even in exile, the legacy of the Jedi endures. Every held breath, every flicker of bioluminescence, and every soft whisper through the water speaks of resilience and renewal. Thus, beneath Mon Cala's endless ocean and hidden within its ancient secret passages, the Jedi in exile persist, waiting, watching, and preparing for the day when the galaxy might again turn toward the light. In the hidden corridors of exile beneath the surface of Mon Cala, whispers of hope and danger mingled with the salt of ancient seas. Amid these secret havens, a new, unexpected light began to shine, a small, Force-sensitive child whose very presence defied the shadows that had long engulfed the Jedi. In a bustling market on a remote outer rim world, the child's aura flickered like a soft beacon amid the clamor of trade and survival. Floating toys drifted lazily among market stalls, their colors muted by the harsh desert sun, while vendors exchanged hushed glances, uncertain of the miraculous glow that now emanated from one among them. The initiate, who had long chronicled the hidden lives of exiled Jedi, soon learned that this child, known only by a whispered nickname among local folk, possessed an unearthly radiance. It was as if the Force itself had chosen to manifest in a delicate human form. This light, however, was not without consequence. Word of the child's luminous presence spread quickly, drawing the attention of those who would use such power for their own ends. One fateful afternoon, in a narrow, crowded market filled with the mingled aromas of spice and sand, an elderly Jedi, once a renowned master before being forced into silence, noticed the glow. His eyes, clouded with the weight of past regrets, widened as he recognized the unmistakable pulse of the Force in the child. With a heavy heart, he made a swift decision to intervene, knowing that the child's safety and future could not be left to chance. In that moment, the old master reached out with a trembling hand, determined to shield the child from the looming threat of Imperial scrutiny. As the master drew near, cloaked figures emerged from the crowded alleys. Inquisitors, ever vigilant and merciless, drawn by rumors of a hidden beacon of Force sensitivity. Panic gripped the marketplace. Shouts rang out as merchants and buyers scattered into the maze of narrow streets. Amid the chaos, the master clutched the child close, his every step hurried, his senses alert to the danger that pursued them. Cloaks and hoods blended with the shadows as the would-be hunters melted into the crowd, their presence a cold reminder of the Empire's insatiable hunger for lost Jedi. The scene transformed in an instant. The vibrant market, once filled with mundane commerce, became a stage for a desperate escape. The old Jedi, his voice barely audible over the clamor, murmured words of solace and urgency. "Hold fast to your light," he whispered to the child, whose eyes shone with a mix of wonder and fear. In that fleeting exchange, the promise of hope intertwined with the burden of exile, a destiny the child would never choose, but one that fate had imposed upon him. As they moved through labyrinthine streets, the master's cloak billowed, and the child's small hand clutched tightly at his. The weight of the past pressed upon them. Every step was a reminder of the fallen order and the sacrifices made for survival. The initiate observed this silent procession from afar, recording every detail in his mind, a testament to the resilience of those who dare to defy the Empire. The image of the Master's outstretched hand, reaching protectively toward the child, shone like a solitary beacon amid a sea of fear and treachery. Their escape was not without cost. A flash of a blaster bolt, a moment of chaos as an Inquisitor briefly emerged from the throng, and then the fleeing figures dissolved into the night. The marketplace, once a place of everyday life, was left in disarray. Evidence of a sudden upheaval that marked the beginning of a new chapter in the hidden legacy of the Jedi. In that breathless moment, the old Master understood that his duty was not only to safeguard the child, but also to bear the burden of passing on the lost wisdom of the Order. The radiant glimmer of the child promised a future where hope might be rekindled, even as the Empire's dark reach continued unabated. Stepping away into the anonymity of the darkened alleyways, the Master and the child vanished like whispered legends. Their journey, fraught with peril yet imbued with a fragile promise, signified not the end, but the rebirth of a secret hope. The quiet determination in the child's eyes and the steadfast resolve of the old Jedi combined to form a beacon that would echo through the ages, a luminous spark poised to challenge the very darkness that sought to extinguish it. In the wake of endless conflict and despair, where the ruins of lost worlds lay barren, one Jedi dared to cultivate hope. Far from the relentless violence of the Empire's reach, on a desolate wasteland scarred by ancient battles, a solitary figure worked in silence. Here, amid a landscape of cracked earth and dust that whispered of forgotten life, the Jedi sought to nurture a spark of renewal using the gentle, mysterious power of the Force. The scene unfolds on a remote planet, its surface a canvas of desolation, where time itself seemed to have paused in sorrow. Amid the broken remnants of civilization, the Jedi knelt by a parched clearing. With deliberate, reverent gestures, he extended his hands to the dry ground. In that moment, the Force flowed through him like a soft tide, a current meant not for destruction, but for creation. From his palms, subtle energy seeped into the dust, and gradually, tiny green shoots began to emerge from the barren soil. Blossoms, delicate and defiant, unfurled amidst the ruin, their fragile petals a testament to life's stubborn persistence. Around him, the silence of the wasteland was slowly transformed into a symphony of renewal. The Jedi's eyes shone with quiet determination as he labored beneath a sky tinted with the faint hues of dusk. Every movement was imbued with a sacred purpose: to heal the scars of the past, to mend what had been broken, and to restore a fragment of the balance that the dark side had long sought to unmake. In his solitude, the Force revealed its nurturing side, echoing with ancient wisdom that life, no matter how suppressed, always finds a way to emerge. Yet even as the garden took shape, a small oasis of vibrant green amid a sea of desolation, there loomed an ever-present threat. The Empire, with its insatiable appetite for control and order, had not forgotten the existence of any remnant of the Jedi. Far off on the horizon, the low rumble of approaching starships disturbed the stillness. The heat of distant fires mingled with the cool twilight, casting long, uncertain shadows over the fragile bloom of new life. The Jedi sensed that his quiet act of creation, his effort to reclaim hope from the ashes, would not go unchallenged for long. In that precarious moment, as the first gentle winds stirred the newly sprouted blossoms, the Jedi made a silent vow. He would protect this garden at all costs, a living symbol of healing and defiance. The Force, as ever, was both fragile and relentless. It was the unspoken promise that even in the harshest of environments, life could be reborn. Yet, the threat of the Empire's wrath was undeniable. Their oppressive might would soon reach out to snuff out this tender light, and in doing so, force him into one final desperate act. The memory of past sacrifices surged within him, a mentor's farewell, a friend's last stand, the quiet agony of loss that had defined the Jedi's fall. But here, in this isolated haven, those sorrows were transformed into a resolve to nurture, not to fight. Each blossom was a gentle rebellion, a soft cry of defiance against a galaxy ruled by fear and destruction. The Jedi stood and surveyed his work, a garden blooming from dust, a quiet testament to hope emerging from ruin. But as the distant engines of Imperial craft grew louder, his heart pounded with the realization that his peaceful sanctuary might soon be shattered by the relentless storm of war. He gathered what little he could carry, small tokens of the garden, perhaps a single bright petal or a fragment of a sprouting seed, and prepared to vanish into the night. His path would be one of continual evasion, a life lived in the shadows, always carrying the precious memory of that garden, a beacon for future generations who might one day reclaim the light. The garden, though small, had ignited something within him. It was proof that even amid the ashes of despair, the Force could nurture new beginnings. And as the fiery glow of distant explosions crept over the horizon, he stepped away, heart heavy yet resolute, knowing that this act of creation was both a defiance and a promise that hope, once kindled, endures even against the darkest of forces. Ash carried on. The wind settled over the Jedi's cloak as he moved on, once more a ghost among the stars. Yet even as he fled the Empire's wrath, the echo of blossoms blooming from dust lingered within him. It was a sign, not of finality, but of a question still unanswered. What remains of the Jedi when all else is gone? And so he followed instinct, dreams, and the faintest tremors in the Force to a place long forgotten. A hollow temple nestled among jagged cliffs on a forsaken world where light and memory had been left to rot. The temple's outer stones were cracked by time, its steps blanketed in moss and silence. But the moment the Jedi crossed its threshold, the air shifted. The Force hummed beneath the surface like an ancient song, and with it came a chill, not born of weather, but of presence. He walked through crumbling halls, etched with fading glyphs, remnants of teachings once passed from master to Padawan in quiet reverence. Statues of long-dead Jedi loomed in shadow, their faces worn smooth by time and forgotten prayers. It should have been comforting. Instead, it felt like standing in a graveyard where the dead refused to rest. Then, the voices began. Not loud, not clear, just there, like the breath of wind through hollow stone, whispers of names he'd known in childhood, echoes of masters who had once stood tall in the temple on Coruscant. He paused in the central chamber, where the ceiling had collapsed, allowing thin shafts of light to spill across the floor like faded memories. He closed his eyes, and the whispers grew louder. Do not let fear define you. We are more than warriors. The Force flows through all things, even endings. He fell to his knees, overwhelmed, and pressed a hand to the cracked floor. Beneath his palm, the stone gave way, a hidden compartment, untouched by scavengers or time. Inside, wrapped in old cloth and quiet reverence, lay a lightsaber, Not his, not one he recognized, but it thrummed with warmth, and the force surged around it like breath returning to lungs long stilled. As his fingers closed around the hilt, a vision overtook him. He stood in the same chamber, only whole now, filled with Jedi of ages past, meditating, teaching, debating. The ghosts didn't speak directly to him, but he felt them, not mournful, not angry, watching, waiting for him to choose. The vision passed. The temple returned to its hollow self. But something had changed. He lit the saber, just once. The blue glow was soft, not a weapon's scream, but a candle in darkness. The ghosts quieted, not because they were gone, but because he no longer needed their guidance. In their silence, he understood. The Jedi were not a building, nor a code written in stone. They were acts, choices, made in defiance of fear, even when made alone. He left the saber buried again, not out of fear, but out of choice. It was not his path to reclaim the mantle of Jedi Knight. Not yet. But it was his path to remember, to carry forward the spark of what had been, and nurture it, wherever it might still grow. As he exited the ruins, the voices of the past faded into the wind. No longer whispers, but wind at his back. The temple behind him stood quiet again, its hollow halls still broken, but no longer abandoned. The force had stirred within its walls once more, and with it, so had he. The temple's silence had offered answers, but not salvation. Across the stars, others still ran, still fought, still hid beneath the weight of a name that had become a death sentence. And not all who carried that burden did so with robes and reverence. Some clung to survival with grit, luck, and the engines of rusting starships. In the far reaches of the outer rim, beneath a binary sunset and the hum of docking clamps, a Corellian freighter sat like a scabbed wound on the skin of a forgotten port. Inside, crates rattled with unregistered cargo, power couplings buzzed with anxious energy, and in the cockpit sat a smuggler who cared little for empires or rebellions, only credits. Jax Varro made his living skipping borders and bribing checkpoints. He didn't ask questions about the names on his manifests, but when a woman boarded his ship wrapped in silence and shadow, offering a sealed crate double pay and no eye contact, even Jax felt the warning bells. Still, the credits were real, and his fuel tank was dry. She said little, slept little, eyes always on the stars, and at night, when she thought he wasn't watching, she'd meditate. The kind of stillness that screamed Jedi. Jax had seen it before. During the war, when his old crew ran supply drops for the Republic, he'd watched robed warriors lift boulders with a gesture and slice tanks in half. Most were dead now. Some, it seemed, weren't. The tension thickened with every light year. In the dead silence of hyperspace, strange things happened. One night, the ship's lights dimmed as the stars stretched around them, and Jax caught a reflection in the viewport. Her eyes glowed, not bright, not unnatural, but like twin embers, tired, alert, ready. He didn't confront her then, not until the Imperials showed up. A patrol cruiser caught them exiting hyperspace near a restricted sector, too far from any lane to claim it was an accident. Jax scrambled to bluff, to stall, but a boarding party was en route. He ran to the cargo bay, searching for a place to hide the crate. She was already there, hood down, calm. "They're here for me," she said. Not an apology, a fact. And then it happened. One trooper opened the crate, found her saber, silver-hilted. The glow of it surged before she even reached for it. In a breath, she moved, not like a soldier, but like a storm. Blasters ricocheted off crates. Screams echoed. The saber flashed once, twice, then silence. Jax lowered his blaster. He hadn't fired it, hadn't needed to. The hold stank of ozone and blood. He looked at her, saber extinguished in her hand, and spoke the only words that felt real. "Next time, tell me what's in the crate." She smirked, the first crack in her armor. "Would you have flown me?" "Hell no," he muttered, then added, "but I would have charged more." They dumped the bodies in the void, changed transponders, set course for another nowhere world. By the time they reached the rim's edge, they'd shared enough silence to become uneasy allies. She taught him how to feel danger before it struck. He taught her how to lie at customs without flinching. He still didn't know her name, didn't ask. But when she left, hood raised once more, saber hidden again, he realized something strange had happened. He missed her. Not for the mystery, not for the thrill, but for the sliver of truth she left behind. That even hunted, even broken Jedi could still be human. And sometimes that was enough to light a corner of the galaxy no empire could ever fully darken. Jax Varro never spoke of the Jedi again, but the rumor did. Stories travel faster than ships in the Outer Rim, especially when they're whispered in cantinas between gulps of cheap ale and half-truths. A smuggler, a glowing blade, a woman who vanished into stardust. But these stories weren't just curiosities. They were signals, distant flares in the night sky for those still watching, still hoping. And elsewhere, across dusty moons and rain-soaked cities, people did more than listen. They gathered. It began with names, old contacts, wartime comrades, Force sensitives who had once slipped through the Empire's fingers. They met in crumbling monasteries, derelict mines, cargo holds sealed tight from sensors. A whisper here, a nod there. Trust earned not with rank, but with silence. And in that silence, something fragile began to grow. Not yet a rebellion, not even a movement, a network. At its center was no leader, only a cause. Scattered Jedi survivors, Force-sensitive children, and those too stubborn to believe the Empire would last forever. Each brought something to the circle. Stolen maps, old holocrons, names of sympathetic senators, coordinates of safe houses buried beneath false transponders. In one system, a healer smuggled Bacta patches to a fugitive Padawan. In another, a farmer with an old clone helmet buried 4 Inquisitors in his field and told no one. It wasn't loud, it wasn't fast, but it was happening. On a nameless moon, beneath red emergency lights and a flickering projector, a ring of figures leaned over a holomap. They plotted escape routes and sabotage, routes that bypassed Imperial patrols. They argued, too, about tactics, about trust, about what the Jedi should mean in a world that had turned against them. But every voice mattered. That was the difference. In the alleys of Lower Coruscant, a young Bothan pickpocket passed messages between contacts. She thought they were smuggling spice. Only later did she realize she was running hope. Some of the network's faces were known. A disgraced general with a scar across his eye, a Twi'lek engineer who once rebuilt lightsabers for fallen Padawans, a droid with corrupted memory, but hands that still knew how to wire ignition cells for escape pods. But most were nameless. The ones who cooked food for hidden children. The ones who passed along fake ID chips. The ones who saw stormtroopers march into a square and turned their heads just long enough to let a fugitive slip away. And the children, always the children. They were the reason for it all. The ones who hummed Jedi lullabies in hushed voices, who dreamed of glowing blades and starships and freedom, who asked questions about the old days, about the Jedi Temple, the clone generals, the war they never saw. Around campfires and inside hollowed-out cargo bays, old knights and survivors would tell them. Not everything, not the whole truth, but enough. That the Jedi had once stood for peace, that they made mistakes, that they fell, and that some still remained. Somewhere, among the stars. One such child, a boy with wide eyes and calloused hands, traced the stars on a frayed star map one night. He pointed to a distant system and asked, "Do you think they're still out there?" An old woman nodded, her voice barely a breath. "Yes, and they're waiting for you." Because while the Empire hunted the light, it could never truly extinguish it. Not while voices still whispered, not while hands still reached, not while even a single map, lit red in the dark, pointed to a place where hope still lived. The network whispered, moved, and adapted amid the endless canvas of shadows. But no matter how subtle its machinations, it could not forever conceal the vigilant gaze of the Empire. In the cold void of space and within the hidden corners of urban sprawl, the Empire's eyes shone, unblinking and relentless. Droids roamed marketplaces with sensors that scanned every shifting face. Inquisitors lingered near closed doors with silent vigilance, and even a whispered breath of dissent risked betraying the last flicker of hope. In this atmosphere of pervasive observation, the disappearance of Master Kel Dorin sent tremors through the clandestine circles of the Resistance. He was more than a teacher. He was a beacon of remembrance in a time when the Jedi Temple was remembered not for war, but for wonder and learning. His quiet guidance had nurtured the young Force sensitives, helping them embrace the light before it became a crushing burden. His voice, gentle and encouraging, had sown seeds of belief, urging his disciples to remember why they lived, even in the midst of tyranny. And then, as if swallowed by the maw of the Empire's cruelty, he was gone. On the cold, harsh streets of Nar Shan, amidst a narrow, rain-slicked alley, Master Kel Dorin met his fate. Stormtroopers, faceless in their discipline, surrounded him quickly, and a silent, blade-wielding sister stood at the ready. In that dire moment, Kel Dorin did not struggle. He did not shout defiance. Instead, with calm resolve, he looked upon the children he had been safeguarding, raised a trembling yet steadfast hand, and uttered 3 simple, indelible words. "Run. Remember me." His voice, soft as a midnight murmur, carried the weight of an entire legacy. The frightened faces of the gathered children absorbed his final instruction, and they fled into the chaos, their hearts burdened with loss, yet ignited with a fragile spark of hope. The Empire, ever calculating, did not let his defiance go unnoticed. Kel Dorin was swiftly taken to a grim, secure facility carved into obsidian cliffs, a place hidden from prying eyes and distant from mercy. Beneath the sterile glare of interrogation lights that flickered like dying stars, ruthless Inquisitors leaned in to extract secrets. Although the dreaded presence of Darth Vader was absent, his brutal methods echoed in every meticulous probe. Mind probes, tangled fragments of memories, and twisted echoes of ancient oaths were all employed to break the spirit of the Master. Yet Kel Dorin resisted. The resistance was not in vocal protest, but in a determined, serene silence. He breathed slowly, calmly, his eyes closed in quiet defiance, his lips barely moving. The Inquisitors' frustration mounted as their cruel techniques spiraled from calculated interrogation into pure, unrestrained cruelty. Despite the barrage of torment, Master Kel Dorin endured, his composure remaining as steady as the pulse of a distant star. It was not a cry of defeat he offered, but a message, woven into the very currents of the Force. In that silent suffering, Kel Dorin transmitted a message, one not conveyed by digital communiques or encrypted codes, but by the unmistakable cadence of the Force itself. His inner light, gentle yet unyielding, reached out to those who would come after him. It was a message for the children who might one day discover a Kyber crystal, for the solitary wanderer gazing upon twin suns, questioning their solitude. His message was both simple and profound. The light is memory. Carry it. Kel Dorin layered this message with visceral imagery, the echo of laughter from the long-forgotten gardens of the Jedi Temple, the tender warmth of sunlight streaming through an ancient training hall, and the hushed, anticipatory silence that preceded a lightsaber lesson. Each recollection was imbued with calm resilience, a promise of hope rather than a call for vengeance. Across the galaxy, those attuned to the subtle shifts in the Force felt a stirring. A distant warmth emerged, a reprieve from the relentless fear, as if a long-dormant embers of purpose had been reignited. Eventually, the Empire's cruelty could not sustain its indifference. The relentless Inquisitors, frustrated by Kel Dorin's unwavering silence, abandoned the interrogation chamber. The sterile lights dimmed, and the heavy door hissed shut, sealing off the dark proceedings one final time. In that profound stillness, as the chamber's air grew colder and the echo of footsteps faded, Master Kel Dorin allowed a serene smile to grace his face. For he knew that in the eyes of his captors, breaking the body might be an accomplishment, but they could never shatter the essence of his soul. The luminous spark of the Force, once ignited in truth, could flourish even within the confines of despair, even in prison, even in death. When the guards returned, the room was hushed in a solemn, eerie peace. No trace remained of the struggle that had once taken place, except for a subtle mark on the floor where Kel Dorin had sat, a mark that glowed faintly with residual light, a vestige of the Jedi Order's crest burned into the stone by sheer will. This solitary symbol, a scar on the Empire's might, would serve as an everlasting tribute to a teacher's undying legacy. Elsewhere in the galaxy, a child awoke from a nightmare with an inexplicable feeling of peace. A smuggler hesitated on the cusp of betrayal and turned back, and hidden enclaves of refugees stirred with courage that defied explanation. Master Kel Dorin was gone, but his gentle voice, his treasured memory, would resonate quietly and endlessly wherever the Force still breathed. Even as the flames of war consumed their temples and troopers hunted them to the edge of extinction, the Jedi did not vanish. They changed. In the wake of Master Kel Dorin's sacrifice, subtle tremors rippled through the Force, not loud, not defiant, but insistent. Hope, not shouted in rebellion, but whispered in survival. The Jedi were no longer generals on the front lines or robed sages in marble halls. They had become gardeners, wanderers, healers, and keepers of balance in forgotten corners of the galaxy. They were exiles, not by choice, but by conviction. On the frozen cliffs of Barkara, an old knight kept a quiet watch over migrating herds, offering shelter to outcasts and stories to children who asked. In the ruins of an old library on Erith, a woman with a silver blindfold taught orphans how to listen to the wind and how to hear its warnings. They carried no banners, they issued no commands, but their presence softened places hardened by fear. They were Jedi, not in name, but in essence. One lived beneath a burned-out mining colony, never igniting his saber, never revealing his name. He helped restore breathers for sick children, gave away food without taking credit, and closed his eyes each night to listen. When a violent gang tried to take the settlement, he didn't fight them. Not at first. He negotiated, bartered, tried to guide. Only when blood was spilled did he act, swift as wind, precise as a falling leaf. Not to punish, to end violence. And when he left the next morning, the villagers found a single line etched into stone: peace through presence, not power. Elsewhere, deep in the swamps of Jombaral, a former Padawan built a school, not for Jedi, but for all. There were no trials, no ranks, just lessons in empathy, perception, and harmony. The Force was taught not as a weapon, but as a lens through which to understand life. The galaxy called it a cult. The Empire labeled it dangerous. But children came anyway. Some with strange dreams, some with quiet gifts, some simply with curiosity. And under the leaves, surrounded by chirps and still water, they learned to breathe. These exiled Jedi were not organizing rebellion. They were not plotting vengeance. They were being what they were always meant to be, guardians of peace, in any form peace might take. Their lightsabers lay buried beneath floors, hung above doorways as symbols, or dismantled entirely. Some no longer used them at all. Others lit them only for protection, and only when all else failed. Their strength was not in bladework anymore. It was in patience, compassion, clarity. And though they were scattered, stars flickering across endless space, they remained connected. The Force bound them, still whispered through them, sometimes faintly, sometimes as loud as a heartbeat in the void. In moments of need, they felt each other, not as names, but as presences. A mother on Naboo heard a song in her dreams and began to hum it aloud, never knowing a Jedi child heard it too, across systems. An elder on Osar drifted into meditation and saw the face of another long-thought dead, smiling in twilight. In dark places, people still lit candles. In hidden rooms, ancient words were still spoken. And sometimes, only sometimes, someone would close their eyes and hear it. We are still here. That was the truth the Empire could never destroy. Not entirely. It was easy to kill warriors, harder to kill belief, even harder to erase balance. The Jedi who had survived had lost everything: titles, comrades, homes. But in their loss, they found something deeper, something less rigid, more human. They became what the Order had forgotten in its final years, part of the living galaxy, not above it. They would not return as an army. They would return as light, quiet, humble, and everywhere. In one forgotten valley, a child lifted a stone without touching it, and his father, once a fugitive Jedi, simply nodded. In another world, a fisherwoman healed a sick eel by placing her hands near its wound, and whispered thanks to her lost master. In the depths of Coruscant, far below the city's surface, someone lit a blue flame and began to tell stories. The Jedi did not die, they evolved.